The poem under consideration is certainly a powerful poem. It has been provided with a very powerful conclusion, a very vibrant, very dynamic conclusion by the poet. As one reaches the concluding lines of the poem, one is reminded of the immortal words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the South African civil rights activist. I quote, "It means a great deal for those who are oppressed to know that they are not alone." Unquote. I repeat, it means a great deal for those who are oppressed to know that they are not alone. Certainly, those who are oppressed, wherever they be, when they read this poem of Margaret Atwood, they are sure to feel that, they are sure to know that they are not alone. The poet declares that elsewhere this poem is not invention. The word elsewhere is repeated 5 times in the concluding part of the poem for emphasis, for force, to provide that part of the poem with a kind of verbal unity, and above all, to shift the thematic focus of the poem powerfully to elsewhere, to the countries which are not Canada, to the countries where violence, brutality, exploitation, oppression, atrocity are everyday phenomena. The poet says elsewhere this poem is not invention. For Canadians living in one of the most advanced societies of the world, this poem may be invention. This poem may be so far removed from their own reality that they feel it is nothing but invention. Elsewhere, this poem takes courage. It requires a lot of courage. It demands a lot of courage to write this poem elsewhere, not in Canada. It's quite easy for Margaret Atwood, living in Canada, to write this poem, but to write this poem elsewhere requires courage. It is almost as if the poet admits that she lacks the determination, the courage, the heroism to write the poem, to write this poem where it should be written, and that is elsewhere. Be that as it may, the poet says that this poem has to be written, this poem must be written elsewhere, because the poets of those countries, the poets of elsewhere, are already dead. They have been dispatched to heaven or maybe to hell by their dictators. They cannot write such poems. They cannot write such poems. And so the poet feels that she has to write this poem elsewhere. The poet knows that she has to pay a very heavy price to write the poem elsewhere. She will have to pay for writing the poem with her life. But that does not matter. She must write the poem and write it elsewhere as if she is already dead. She knows that once the poem is written, nothing can save her life. Nothing can be done, nothing can be said to save her. But that does not matter. She feels that it is her sacred responsibility. It is her holy duty to write the poem, and not merely write the poem, write it elsewhere, and then lay down her life for writing the poem. The poem concludes with the lines, elsewhere You must write this poem because there is nothing more to do. The poet is determined to write the poem elsewhere. She knows that she may be put to death, she will be put to death for writing the poem. She is prepared for that. She is ready to lay down her life for writing the poem. What is the concluding line? What is the very last line of the poem? Because there is nothing more to do. It would appear that Margaret Atwood would like to do something better than merely writing the poem, merely writing this poem elsewhere. Perhaps she would like to do something more tangible than writing this poem, to do something more proactive than writing this poem, to bring about changes in that particular society, to bring about transformations in that particular socio-political system. But she feels that she is incapable of doing such things. And so she will write the poem and then die for writing the poem. There is nothing more she can do than writing the poem and paying for it with her life. Here is Margaret Atwood, the famous writer, the well-off writer, living in Canada, leading a comfortable life in Canada, enjoying all the benefits of the democratic society of Canada, preparing to write a poem and lay down her life for the sake of the people of elsewhere. What burns through the entire poem in general, and what burns to the concluding part of the poem in particular, is the passionate, is the intense empathy of the speaker with the suffering people of the unnamed countries which have totalitarian socio-political systems and which are grouped together in the poem under the rubric elsewhere. Let us take a quick look at the stylistic component of the poem. The poem is a free verse poem. It has abandoned the metered line. It has discarded the regular rhyme scheme. It refuses to subject itself to regular stanzaic patterns. It is a free verse poem, and there is not much of a dramatic variation in its linear length, but there is some variation, and it is this variation that provides the poem with its strength, with its suppleness. Students sometimes point out that there is something rough and ready about the texture of the poem, that the poem suffers from a lack of sophistication. I admit that they are right. You must remember that this is not a poem, but only the draft of a poem. Not even the draft of a poem, but a set of notes moving towards the writing of a poem. And understandably, the poem lacks sophistication, smoothness, polish, and the texture of the poem is certainly uneven, certainly rough. And I have to point out that the rough and ready nature of the poem perfectly suits the thematic concerns of the poem, and these are the atrocity, the violence, the brutality that is taking place in certain countries in the contemporary world. You can be sure that smooth, polished, sophisticated, glamorous lines can never ever capture effectively these thematic concerns. It has to be conceded that there is some irony in a poem which calls itself a poem that cannot be written. And this irony is part of the strength of the poem. The poem makes effective use of figures of speech like metaphor, wreaths of adjectives, and simile, count them like beads in the second section. It makes use of a series of rhetorical questions in the penultimate section, where the poet asks whether it is a hallucination or a vision, where she asks what is it that she sees, what is it that she hears. The poem makes appropriate use of repetition in the concluding part, where the word elsewhere is repeated 5 times. Not just 5 times, but 5 times at the beginning of each line. We have discussed the title of the poem in some detail, but here I wish to point out that the poem has a rather long title, Notes Towards a Poem That Can Never Be Written, and that there is an element of irony in the title of a poem which calls itself a poem that cannot be written. On the whole, it can be said that there is a perfect synchronization between the thematic component of the poem and the poem's stylistic component.